This episode is partly about Apple Arcade on the Apple TV, but it's all about Apple Arcade. All About Apple Arcade is the unofficial podcast about Apple Arcade games, featuring news, reviews of the games themselves, and interviews with gamers and the creators behind the games. Join us on Facebook or Twitch, All About Apple Arcade, and on Twitter, Apple Arcade Pod. Hello, and welcome to another episode of All About Apple Arcade. I am your host, Joel Sharpton, Chief Editing Officer for Pro Podcasting Services, and a Apple Arcade-aholic. Can I call myself that yet? I think I can. Some big news, actually, since I last recorded and I last talked to you. First and foremost, we're on Apple Podcasts. Yay! We're also on Spotify and Stitcher Radio, so you can find us now in basically all the podcast directories. We're in Overcast as well. If we're not somewhere that you want to listen to us, let me know, and I'll try to get us there as soon as possible. You can email the show allaboutapplearcade@icloud.com, and not only can you tell me where you'd like me to make sure that I get this podcast submitted to, but also you can give me feedback on Apple Arcade games or the show itself. We'd love to hear what you're thinking and playing so far. Here's the big news. Apple Arcade is now available on both the iPad and Apple TV. The update was originally scheduled for September 30th, and then almost immediately Apple sped it up, but that was after I had recorded and released the last episode. So it is available as of today. September 24th, you can now update your iPads and your Apple TV devices, and that's Apple TV 4th generation and the Apple TV 4K, I should say. Apple Arcade is not available on the 3rd generation or older Apple TV devices. But I have been playing a little bit this morning. I loaded up a handful of games. I ran through a session of The Floor is Lava, which I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of. We're going to talk maybe some more about that next week. I ran through a couple of rounds of Pinball Wizard, which, as you heard last week, I really love. I played one dungeon in Oceanhorn 2, which is what I was most excited about getting on the Apple TV. But Apple Arcade focused, let me tell you that I have also, since I now have the Apple TV in the house, I got myself an Apple TV 4K 32 gigabyte. I bought it at a used video game store, but actually I felt like it was a steal. I was a little worried about buying it used, and yet when we opened the box, it was still all wrapped up. It had never been opened, never been connected, so it is a brand new Apple TV. I'm really excited about that deal. But I broke down and bought that last week in preparation for today. I wanted to be ready to play those games today when it rolled out, and so I was. I played a handful of rounds of those games that I mentioned before, but the other thing that I was playing even before Apple Arcade launched, I have rediscovered Real Racing 3. My youngest son in particular is a big fan of Gran Turismo and other, racing simulators, I guess I should say. And while Real Racing 3 is not exactly up to that level, it is pretty cool. And if you turn off the auto assist features and you turn it all onto manual, then it plays a lot like a Gran Turismo game. Honestly, you're slowly grinding and upgrading your car over time, racing different races and buying different models of real world vehicles. Anyway, it's a game that I've had for several years. I've played it on the iPhone and the iPad before, but never played it a lot because I didn't have a controller. Here on the Apple TV, it's kind of awesome. And it's not even that huge a download. It's I think right at 2 gigabytes with all of the extra stuff down. I told it to download all the features so that I won't have to load those later in the future. So the question for you, perhaps if you're like me and had sat out this modern generation of Apple TVs, is now the time to buy one? If you have waited so far, even if you're a big Apple Arcade fan like I am and you're very excited about these games, I would still suggest that most of you probably wait at least another month. And the reason for that is there are rumors that there's going to be an October event. Apple TV Plus, their new television service, rolls out in November 1st. And so I think before then, it's possible that they'll release an updated Apple TV and or reprice the current models. So if you don't have one of these, either the 4th generation or the Apple TV 4K already in your house, I'd say wait and see if they, first of all, maybe put a new processor in. The processor in the current models is the A10X, which is about 2 years old or so, 3 now actually. The A13 just came out, so one imagines that in October we'll probably get iPads with the A13X. They could easily go to the A12 or the A12X that's out there, the processor that's in my iPad from last year. That would be a screaming processor to put in to a system that you plan on people playing a lot of games on. The other thing that I would love to see is although I think it's unlikely, I'd love to see new sizes of storage. 64 gigabytes should be the minimum, and then maybe allow an upgrade to a 128 if you're a big game fan and you want to just load up a ton of games. Having said that, I've probably got 10 games on my Apple TV right now, which is a 32 gigabyte, 10 games in addition to 15 probably streaming services and different apps like Amazon shopping app and the IKEA catalog and things like that, all loaded right now, and I've got no storage issues whatsoever. There's not really a way that I can find so far to see an actual storage bar on the Apple TV, but I don't think I'm going to have any problem. If you look at the sizes of the individual files, they're all pretty small. The ones that are big that I'm running right now, Sayonara Hearts is over a gigabyte. The Agent Intercept is over a gigabyte. Oceanhorn 2 is over 2 gigabytes, and then, like I said earlier, the Real Racing is over 2 gigabytes as well when you download all of the packs for it. So, anyway. There's a little counsel for you. Maybe wait. If you're going to be a big game fan, maybe go ahead and get the larger Apple TV when you buy it. My plan eventually is to have a couple of these in the house, so this one will not be the primary one long term. If and when I buy a new one, I'll almost definitely get that one a 64 gigabyte. So there you go. That's my suggestion, is the Apple TV rumors. There have been some slight rumblings, nothing serious, but it's also about the time to update it again, to throw a new processor in it at least. So maybe wait and see if the pricing structure at least juggles around a little bit. Apple Arcade, we don't know how successful it's been so far. Apple's not talking about it yet. They'll probably mention it in some way at the October event. They might even give an update on some bombastic number of initial subscriptions or something. But we know that it's a success already, at least in some ways, because Google has now copied it. There's a link in the show notes, but Google has announced the Play Pass, Google Play Pass. Now, the difference between the Play Pass and Apple Arcade, well, they're pretty significant, honestly. First of all, Google says they're going to have more than 350 apps and games in the Play Pass at launch, and there'll be new ones added every month. You notice I said apps and games. Apple's Apple Arcade subscription, $4.99, only gets you games. There are no apps that are included in that. You could imagine them doing something like that in the future, but Google's subscription service here, $4.99 as well. You can even sign up. If you do it right away, you can get it for a year for $1.99 a month, but it includes apps as well. What is not available in Google Play Pass, at least at this time, at launch, at the announce of this thing, that is available in Apple Arcade, is anything original. Apple Arcade is full of games that we've never played before. Games like Oceanhorn 2. We knew that was coming, but there's no other place to play Oceanhorn 2 except through the subscription with Apple Arcade. That's the best one in my opinion. Dear Reader is another one that I've been really enjoying. Pinball Wizard, which I've talked about a lot. Those games are not available anywhere else. They didn't exist prior on the App Store. Now, there have been there has been some speculation, definitely from me and from others that I've heard, on whether or not Apple would maybe make deals with current game developers to include very popular games, to roll them in eventually to the Apple Arcade service. But I really got the feeling from everything that Apple has done in the marketing that they want new games in this service. And over time, some of those games will become catalog games, so to speak. The older games will stay around. But the idea is that they want to market and push this on new games all the time. And at launch, here's 100 new games that you've never really seen or played before. And Google Play, that's not what it is. It's more like, hey, give us $5 a month and you can do all the things that you want to do on your phone, all the things that you are trying to do now and having to spend individual money to all these different places. It's an interesting idea. I do think it is a direct response to Apple Arcade. It'll be interesting to see whether they sort of double down on this. The other question, of course, is how does this relate to Stadia, which is their other gaming service that they had announced. Stadia is really, though, about streaming access anywhere. So on any device, you can access and play these AAA quality premium games from PlayStation and Xbox and PC style games. That's the idea, I think, with Stadia. This is more about mobile apps, and specifically it is Android only. Now, Android is available on their tablet devices, and Android is available on some laptops as well, I think. I don't know if those are only like the Chrome devices or if maybe some Samsung devices also have access to the Android store, but anywhere you can get the Google Play Store, you can use this Google Play Pass. So that's an interesting response from Google. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be exciting to me to see how that rolls out and to see how that spurs Apple on to maybe do something similar with the App Store themselves. I got to tell you, I'm loving the idea of having like all-you-can-eat access to these games. There is one downside that Kelly and I have discovered already with that kind of buffet-style pricing, though. When we try a game, even one that we've heard a lot of good things about, and I'm not going to call out either one of them because I don't know whether the bugginess is on the game's side or my devices. I don't know where the problem lies. And I believe it's just bugs. I don't think there's actually some fundamental failure of the game itself. But I tried a game that I had heard a lot about and was highly praised on Twitter. Kelly tried a game, likewise, that she had heard a lot about and looked very good in the arcade listings. Both of us, though, two separate games, both of us failed to figure out effectively how to start the game at all. Maybe that's bugginess. Maybe it's because of a difficulty in on-ramping. But in both of our cases, we didn't give the game very long. The fact of the matter is, with 100 plus games to try, as Apple says at launch, and we already knew we had found several others that we really enjoyed, there's no impetus to stick with one that doesn't immediately grab you or isn't easily accessible. And so here's my plea to any developers that are listening to this show over time. It's incredibly important with the Apple Arcade service, I think, to make a tutorial that really on-ramps users. Now, you should also absolutely make that tutorial skippable for users who have either already played it or users who are very advanced gamers and who don't need it. Either one of those things, you don't want to frustrate a user with a tutorial that's too simple or too slow-paced. But you should also never lose a user who wants to try your game and who wants to enjoy a game, who sees your listing in the store and thinks, this is a game just for me, but then can't figure out what the hell to do with it, so to speak. And that was the experience that I had, exactly. And it turns out that was exactly the experience that Kelly had with a different game. And both of those games have been deleted now off of our devices. Will we try them again? I plan on, at least I can speak for myself, I plan on absolutely trying the one that I was so frustrated with again in a couple of update cycles when both the game and my devices have had a chance to stabilize a little bit. But if I still don't know what the heck I'm doing when I get started, I think probably I'm just going to bounce on that game again. So that's something to think about. You can catch a few sessions of gameplay that I have put up on my Twitch account. The link is in the show notes as well, but it's twitch.tv/allaboutAppleArcade, and I'm going to try to stream at least 2 or 3 times a week, different games as often as I can. In particular, I'm planning on playing a little Oceanhorn 2 and streaming for you guys this week, and I'm also planning on streaming some more of Mini Motorways. That's going to be my big review for this episode. So lock in. We're going to be talking about Mini Motorways now. I'm going to put a little bit of the music in the background here. It's, again, a very peaceful, soothing, calming soundtrack. It sets the stage for exactly what you're doing in this game, which is contemplation and consideration of the layout of a city. Mini Motorways is a game about connecting roads from buildings to homes and mapping out the progress of a city. As it grows slowly, your roads should get more and more complex, but also more and more efficient. My favorite thing about this game, I think, my favorite single mechanic about this game is the pause mechanic. At the top right-hand corner of the game, and there's a picture of the UI in the show notes as well, so check that out. But at the top right-hand, there's a little clock, and under that, there's a pause and a play button. And if you hit pause, time stops for you. All the cars stop moving, the countdowns for the different businesses that need traffic on a regular basis, all of that stops counting, and you can just look and think and make a better plan. And as someone who often finds himself struggling with deadlines and pressure from the schedules of not only, myself and my wife, but 4 kids as well. So you've got a whole family's worth of schedules to contend with, and also clients' concerns and everything else. It's really cool to pause, to throw the Zach meter on, say time out, and come up with a better system than the one you've been struggling along with so far. I would love a pause button for life. Mini Motorways is, in my opinion, the absolute winner of this. I think, honestly, it's risen above even Sayonara Wild Hearts, which, by the way, in episode 1, I kept calling it Sayonara Hearts. The game is called Sayonara Wild Hearts. I had previously put this as number 1 on my list of the launch titles for Apple Arcade. I think Mini Motorways is a better game overall, and in fact, I think it is most indicative of what a lot of commentators have been talking about with Apple Arcade. I've heard a lot of people say that effectively it's like an alternate universe where in-app purchases were never introduced to the App Store. This is effectively like the kinds of games that we were playing when the App Store first launched, and we were all paying $4.99 a piece and $5.99 a piece and $8.99 a piece or whatever. There's some truth to that, and Mini Motorways is the best example of an quote-unquote old-school iPhone game that's currently in Apple Arcade. Here's another thing that I absolutely adore about Mini Motorways. It really, really fills in this promise of Apple Arcade. It plays great on the iPhone, even a small one. I have an iPhone 7. My wife has a XR. Both of those devices, it plays well on. It plays even better, in my opinion, on my 12.9-inch iPad. A great big screen. You can really contemplate and see everything laid out before you. You can even use the pencil if you want to make fine, decisions and lay the roads out, or maybe put a motorway in, a speedway from one area of town to another. Super cool on the iPad. But guess what? They've got controller support as well. And, of course, it works on the Apple TV also. I love that. I love it when a game fulfills the promise of Apple Arcade. Here's one that didn't exactly fulfill that promise for me. I enjoy it. I enjoy it quite a lot on my phone, but it won't extend to the other platforms like Mini Motorways, which I've just praised so highly. Grindstone. Grindstone I mentioned last week as one of my runner-ups, and I'm going to give you a little mini review here too. Grindstone is a cool puzzle game. Think, match 3. So like Dr. Mario or Tetris or any game where you are matching colored items together and trying to get multiples of them to clear off the board. That's basically what Grindstone is. Now, Grindstone has on top of that a very cute gimmick of being about this barbarian working in the mines, killing creepies. And so as you line up your multiple colored items, they're not items, they're little creepies, little creatures. You get several of them all together, and your character swipes through them with his sword. Chop, 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 chop. It's a hilarious mechanic, actually. I fell in love with this game as soon as I downloaded it. I played a lot of it. I got stuck on about the third level, and then I grinded for a while until I could level up enough and get enough hearts to get on out of that level. And now I'm up to about 6 or 7, I think, in the overall world map. But here's where Grindstone fails. Grindstone plays great on my phone, and like I said with many Motorways, it works well on the iPhone 7, works even better on a larger phone like the iPhone XR, which my wife has. However, on my iPad, it is locked into portrait mode. Now, why is that a problem, Joel? Well, for most people's iPads, it's probably not a problem. However, if you have a larger iPad like mine, the 12.9 inch or even the 11 inch, you probably tend to use it in landscape mode. Maybe you even use it like I do, attached to a keyboard. I'm plugged into the Bridge keyboard all the time, effectively. Sometimes in media mode, sometimes as the keyboard looking like a MacBook, effectively. But either way, I've got this keyboard attachment most of the time. Even when I don't, I've got it in the Folio, the Apple Folio, and still I'm carrying it in landscape mode just because it's so large. The iPad is not very, it's cumbersome to carry it in portrait mode with a 13-inch screen, right? There's a reason we don't carry laptops with a portrait mode screen. Grindstone won't rotate into landscape mode. It doesn't have a landscape mode on the iPad. So today, when it launched on Apple Arcade, I was very excited to try it there. And my thought was that I would be able to come here and sort of complain, well, look, you made a great widescreen mode, a landscape orientation for the Apple TV. You've got controller support there. Why not bring those things to the iPad as well? And surprise, surprise, they don't really. Now, they do fill your screen up. But the way they do that is by keeping the game screen in the center. So effectively, you've got a portrait mode iPad in the center, and then they put UI around the sides. They give you, like a view of your collection and a view of your life and all the different little HUD elements, the heads-up display elements. Those are on the sidebars of the screen around the actual game that's happening in the middle. It doesn't look good on the Apple TV. It doesn't play very well with the controller. Honestly, it's not that much fun, particularly the menus themselves don't seem to support it properly at all. And worst of all, it is a huge download on the Apple TV. It was like 2.3 gigabytes to download and play. And when you compare the graphics and gameplay for Grindstone to something like Oceanhorn 2 or even Real Racing 3 from a few years back, there's not a comparison. I don't understand why Grindstone takes 2.3 gigabytes on the Apple TV. I really don't. I don't believe it's that big on the iPhone or iPad. But anyway, there you go. Grindstone is one of those that sort of fails to live up to the promise of Apple Arcade for being a game that can live everywhere. Very good game mechanics, very exciting character design, very cool idea. But I'm very hopeful that will get some evolution over time with updates perhaps, or maybe even a second version down the road. I like the idea of Grindstone. I'd like to play more. Needs to extend better to all the features of all the devices that Apple Arcade supports. So there are a couple of reviews for you, a good one and a bad one, or a not so great one. Mini Motorways and Grindstone. Those are our two featured games this week. Don't forget again to join our Facebook community, All About Apple Arcade, and catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/All About Apple Arcade. You can find us on Twitter. Apple Arcade Pod is the handle there. And please email me your thoughts and your reviews too, allaboutapplearcade@icloud.com, for them to be read out on the show, or You can even call us. The number is 318-935-0332. That's 318-935-0332 to leave a number on leave a message on our Google Voice number. Until next, actually, I'm going to try to have an episode out for you on Thursday of this week with a couple more reviews from my kiddos. Until the next time I talk to you, this has been your host, Joel Sharpton, the Chief Editing Officer for Pro Podcasting Services and an Apple Arcade-aholic. This has been all about Apple Arcade.
Two guys and a rogue.
I'm one guy,
I'm the other.
and this is the network.